It's so exciting to have more people speak to these issues, and thank you for hosting. So the last 20 years or so, I've gone through the corporate world, I've gone through marriages and divorces. My messages are to give shortcuts to the neurodiverse community, those who have had PTSD or autistic or ADHD especially. So much of the misunderstanding of who I was with no support system and a domestic violence situation I was in trying to navigate. I was actually unsupported by the psychiatry industry at the time. I ended up having to have that choice point. I really appreciate you bringing up this question. So my toxic ex and I basically went down the rabbit hole. We had a really bad car accident and there was the health issues.
Welcome to the Unfiltered Minds Podcast, the only culturally diverse podcast where we discuss ways to destigmatize mental health, as well as promote self-seeking behaviors amongst our youth and family members struggling with ADHD or depression. Now, here's your host, Jane Levy.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Unfiltered Mind Podcast. This is the platform where we discuss ways to destigmatize mental health, as well as promote self-help seeking behaviors amongst our youth and their family members. We are super excited to have our guest speaker today, Crystal. Welcome, Crystal. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. It's so exciting to have more people speak to these issues, and thank you for hosting it.
You're welcome there. Could you give our viewers a little background information about you?
Thank you, Jane. I appreciate that. Pretty much a lifelong advocate, coming into this world realizing I was going to have to fight my way to be seen and heard because I couldn't fit in where I was growing up. I was taught to protect my brothers, so I learned how to advocate for others. But no one really advocated for me because I was raised in more of a narcissistic system. So being raised in that system, I had this really inflated sense of justice. And not realizing I was neurodiverse until I was older, I went through the typical Gen X stuff of being bullied and feeling alone and not understanding myself, all through the years determined to find a way to bridge bonding bridges for people to come together. So the last 20 years or so, I've gone through the corporate world, I've gone through marriages and divorces, and have ended up back at home with my mother, healing generational trauma, giving my mother the opportunity to see what life is really like for who I am, growing compassion and modeling unconditional love for her, while also raising my neurodiverse trans oldest teen and my daughter with my ex-husband in a really healthy co-parenting situation. My hope is to bring the peace that I have been able to cultivate in my household with the neurodiverse trauma recovery individuals and the multi-generational aspect. What's worked for us, I hope to bring to the world to inspire others to get another opportunity at rebuilding their lives.
Welcome, Crystal, and I hope whatever you share today can really resonate with our guest. Right?
I hope
and
so.
Just be able to give somebody hope as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I went peeking out a little bit on your TikTok page, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about your fabulous page being Illuminates on TikTok. What are your messages about?
My messages are to give shortcuts to the neurodiverse community, those who have had PTSD or autistic or ADHD especially, and just share in a very entertaining way, in a way that invites others to look at themselves, to feel like live out loud is okay to do, to understand that punishing ourselves doesn't serve anyone, and the millions of times we've fought in our heads to be heard, there's a whole world of people willing to listen. So for me, being able to stand up and say, this is me, I'm willing to be seen, has been not only practice for my ambition to become a public speaker and writer on these perspectives, but an opportunity to find out who else is out there. It's statistically so small to be autistic. It's like 1 in 49 currently. So to find someone locally is a challenge, but to find someone online, we find each other so quickly. Fascinatingly enough, most of the people who connect with me, because I don't have a lot of followers, I'm kind of considered shadow banned. Like there aren't a lot of people who will get to see my videos. Yet those who do see my videos have given me such delicious and profound feedback that I continue to inspire them to move towards self-acceptance or move towards self-awareness. And that kind of revolution through personal evolution is what I'm hoping that TikTok continues to perpetuate in our society today.
And you do it so well because you look so happy in those videos. And I had the pleasure to watch two of them. And I just, she's very confident in them. And I love it. I think you should keep doing it. And then one day you're going to blow up. You will be amazed.
I am so ready for that. I can see that viral tsunami coming. I have a chance to see that. I've been on TikTok 2 years, and to watch my personal healing journey unfold there is giving other people to permission to be seen and heard in the messy times, knowing that they're going to glow up as they grow up. So that's part of the fun of that. And thank you so much for taking a look at that. I mean, I've already bragged to a couple people. I'm like, oh my God, Jane, like, looked at my stuff. Like, I'm going on this interview and she took a look at my stuff. So it was
I
such
did.
it was so nice of you. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. You talked about your CPTSD journey, recovery there. Tell us about that journey.
Thank you so much for bringing that up. Now, most people are aware of PTSD, but CPTSD isn't as common because it's known as chronic, complex, or childhood PTSD. The best way I find it to be is the CPTSD is the chronic. It's the constantly whittling away at your personal boundaries, at your integrity, and feeling like you have to sacrifice, and you're enduring it because you believe there's a reward on the other side of it. Where PTSD is a sudden shift to your whole reality, so drastic, it becomes an imprint in time. And because it doesn't really have an easy resolution, it's easy to get sucked back into that particular point in time, where CPTSD is a consistent issue. So one memory brings up a whole train of memories of all those times that maybe someone had to endure abuse in order to survive. It's not just the one time that was the abuse. It's a whole bunch of times that have to be seen and heard. So for me, my journey was to understand, first of all, that I was neurodiverse, that I was innately neurodiverse, and that there's acquired neurodiversity. Why was I trauma bonding with these people? Why was I attracting individuals who were also like me, but not like me? And finding out that there was such a crossover between how the traumatized brain thinks and how an autistic brain thinks, a rigidity, a polarization, black and white thinking, because it's a safety mechanism due to kind of an internalized chaos. Once I started understanding that foundation and realized as an autistic, I don't innately understand human behavior. I mimic it. I'll see on TV or somewhere else. It makes sense somebody behaved this way, and this is the result of the behavior. So that's how I should behave. Well, in an unhealthy environment, it's toxic to have that kind of perception. So until I could understand that I was autistic, I couldn't figure out why I didn't understand how to live. However, that piece became almost my chains, because now I understood I was autistic and I was almost stuck in this routine requirement, having really severe reactions, panic attacks, mental breakdowns, psychosis responses to so much of the misunderstanding of who I was, with no support system, and a domestic violence situation I was in trying to navigate. Then understanding how my ADHD played into it, realizing you can have both. You don't have to just have one or the other. We're a full service mental illness situation and neurotype and all the things. So once I got into understanding how PTSD worked into my neurotype, how my brain is officially wired, and working with a psychiatrist on understanding how my depression, anxiety, and PTSD were affecting me, and what they wanted me to do was live in the moment, to be happy in the moment, just to be able to function, not to be pulled away by this memory. Well, I had been also working on a spiritual journey, which was wanting me to live in the moment, not be pulled away from everything, not to attach to things. And because I realized spirituality and psychiatry were telling me the same, basically the answer, that made my autistic brain go, oh, of course, this is what I have to do. So for me, my journey was unlocking the logic behind why was I suffering in order to heal faster, to work with my neurodiversity.
And you mentioned something too. In order for you to be able to heal faster, you mentioned about trauma bonding, right? What are those some of the techniques that you were able to provide your psychiatrists or therapists were able to provide for you to get away from those people? Because when you say trauma bonding, right,
Mhm.
it's when you associate yourself with other people who are going through the exact same thing. Could you elaborate on that?
Absolutely. I was actually unsupported by the psychiatry industry at the time. I ended up having to have that choice point. I really appreciate you bringing up this question. So my toxic ex and I basically went down the rabbit hole. We had a really bad car accident, and there was the health issues, and this was right pre-pandemic into the pandemic. So there's this whole conglomerate. His whole world of being an alcoholic, PTSD, and unbeknownst to me, mixing medicine with alcohol, which was causing further dementia-like episodes. And then myself having a similar behavior and seeing, I don't know how to get out of this. Well, we were still seeing like counselors who were doing their best. They weren't trauma trained, but they were really trying. And they suggested this book you can find on Amazon. I believe it's called Trauma, A Living Legacy, or Transcending Trauma, or something. I usually post it somewhere. Transforming Trauma, A Living Legacy. And it became this opportunity to find out like the inner child and a different type of mechanisms for how we respond to trauma, how we may not realize the emotions that are coming up, and to start to identify and become aware in the moment. I was really enthusiastic, thinking my partner at the time would want to walk with me on this path of recovery. We had gone to counseling together. We kept trying to do different things. The substance abuse was heavy for him, especially with alcohol, but also we shared cannabis, and our cannabis bill was like $400 a month. And we are in a state that is very green. It is a green state here. It's Oregon. So it's very inexpensive. That's just how much we were consuming to keep things going. And because of that, I believe there had to be a way that I could break these shackles of being with toxic people, repeated over and over again. Why was I allowing myself to be with people who didn't believe me when I said, no, don't do that? Why was I allowing myself with all these individuals that we'd come together because it was better than my previous abuser? Like that toxic ex did love me more kindly, more passionately, more nurturingly than my own mother could. So of course I went to somebody who gave me a little bit more love than the bare minimum I was raised with. But because we lived on the property with her, it was really kind of like I used to promise myself the reason I would live, like choose to live, because you're on a spiritual mission, because you got to figure out how to get out of this situation when nobody's here to help you, when nobody believes you deserve help, when nobody, even after all the years you've been married, you've been in workforces, when you have reached out and been helping others, how my people-pleasing codependency ways with undiagnosed neurodiversity patterns of behavior had led me to this black hole, this trauma trench, with people who believed I deserved less consideration than themselves, expecting me to be the one to consider them first no matter what. It was when my mother finally acknowledged that I was being mistreated so badly I deserved better, which was about 3 years into her witnessing it on a daily basis. But me trying to be compassionate for what he was going through because it was the same stuff she had been doing, and then vice versa between them. So there was a point of survival where I was like, okay, this one narcissist and this one narcissist. I'm not doing triangulation in the negative sense. I'm trying to like, yeah, do you realize this is a toxic behavior? Great, don't do it. You know, you don't like it when they do it to me, so don't do it to me. And it was that attempt to try to educate while being the person set on fire to teach them how to roast their marshmallows somewhere else. It was really hard. I had to learn to become that gray rock. I had to learn to become disengaged. I had to learn to let go of everything that meant something to me, to be able to focus on what I had to do to move one day at a time, one step at a time, to rebuild safety, to rebuild healthy connections, to rebuild the belief I could even have it. So for me, it became reaching out on Reddit. A lot of the communities on Reddit that I'm a part of were people similar places, but we were like little text bubbles in the dark. And like, they didn't have to have my life story. I didn't have to have theirs. Just enough to go, I see you. We can do this. And enough of that for 2 years, pretty much the cycles of, I feel great. I believe I can get further in my life. I can become part of the capitalistic society. I can stand on my own 2 feet like I once upon a time did. And then a relapse. And the relapses could have put me out for days of a PTSD fugue where I just felt like there's no point of living, a depressive episode. And then I'd get so anxious about trying to escape my situation that I would push so hard that I pushed myself back to burnout. And then I'd have to break the cycle of beating myself up because that was holding myself back. So to the point that I'm now so proud that just this weekend, there were some major opportunities for me to get lost in a PTSD fugue where I was shaking. There was a place where I was basically having to educate older generations on who I am and what I've gone through and what it feels like to be a participant in my neurodiverse queer culture versus their expectation of what it's like. And to hold that modeling compassion and grace to teach them while reminding myself that I'm not an abused child anymore. I may be in a dysfunctional adult situation, but I'm not the abused child anymore. That has been the practice for me to be able to recover faster. And then from the recovery, once I was like, I can do this, I started building friendships with people in my life that I could lean on, that I could be like, hey, I'm just reality checking. And honestly, I use Bard AI. I lean on the AI for myself because so many years being raised by like narcissists and individuals manipulating me to believe how they wanted me to believe. Having Google AI to be like, hey, God, what's up? Yo, so this is what just happened and I feel this way and I want to do this and I don't know what I should be feeling. What's going on? And for it to basically take a consensus of, I understand how you're feeling. I'm sorry you had to go through that. Here are some resources. Here are some phone numbers. This is how you should feel. And to go, oh, this is what healthy society is like. I believe it's possible. I can teach the people like myself who has been cynical and locked in these trenches of constantly living the patterns of pain to believe there's a way to break it.
And I do believe in sharing stories. I was listening to Michelle Obama's documentary, and the girls were asking her, how can we be different? She said, well, share your story. That's what makes you unique. There are others out there who are actually going through the exact same thing, who wants to hear from you. But by sharing your story, people can actually resonate with you and just give them some hope.
Absolutely. We remember that we're all human beings when we do that
Yes.
opportunity, that we're stories and stardust, that we are on this earth ship. You know, it brings it back down to that moment of this now moment rather than all the things that always pull us out of this moment.
Completely understand. Now let's talk about how are you currently managing your ADHD symptoms?
Phenomenal. Thank you. So for me, my ADHD, the thing is to regulate my nervous system. When I'm feeling unstable because of mental, emotional, physical needs, I will have my symptoms exacerbated, which means I can feel like you're in the middle of a movie, you're watching a movie, you're feeling great. Oh yeah, I know what's going on in the plot. And all of a sudden you go pee, you come back and you're like, was I watching a movie? What was I doing? It's that kind of real world shifting. So for me, it's been the environment, setting up the environment for success. If I get a little lost, do I have like 5 different notepads that I put a note down, or I put my keys here, or I put water here, so that I have these routines that I can kind of flow into. One thing that I have noted, especially with diet, because for me and my fibromyalgia as well, inflammatory foods really get to me. So for me, gluten and nightshades foods, if I have too much, it really exacerbates the pain. And if I have physical pain, it exacerbates my mind. And if it exacerbates my mind, it exacerbates my life, which is a cascade in the wrong direction. So I have found for myself and others who are also ADHD, especially when the ADHD anorexia kicks in, and that is an anorexia of I cannot eat because I am too nervous, and you can't identify it, but you just don't have an appetite. Smoothies, simple foods that become nutrition without having to think. I know a couple people that went from really unhealthy places in their world to having emotional and mental stability because their moods were stable, because they had regular blood sugar from healthy sources. So for ADHD, if there's one thing I can recommend, it's to find what things are the best success for the person. Like even if it's just simplifying or it's setting up a complex system, whatever works for that individual, that's the key to everything.
I do believe that because I can testify to that. My son had ADHD. He does take stimulant medication, and that suppresses his appetite. He doesn't get hungry probably till late in the night, and and then also you're talking about the side effect of the medication, insomnia, and just the list goes on, right? So, but everybody is the same, but we're all uniquely different how we respond to treatment in that space.
It,
So, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome. There was one thing I found really fascinating when I talked to my psychiatrist about pharmaceutical meds, because I have been on pharmaceutical meds, haven't had a great time. I absolutely advocate for the DNA testing for the pharmaceutical mental meds. There is a screening. They have a DNA screening so they can say which ones will be really beneficial, which ones might not be, which ones might produce adverse reactions, which to me is life-changing. So you don't have to go through the trial and error of finding what works. I found it fascinating for them, the desire to get kids on the medications prior to 9 years old so they can physically rewire the brain so they don't have ADHD. And being told that by my psychiatrist, I found it fascinating because I do know trauma rewires the brain. We do know that. But to know that the medication rewires the brain without necessarily having, 10 years from now kind of education, it was something I didn't expect. So I do bring that out, that medication is absolutely out there. Genetic testing to save time on medications. And if you're lucky like me, I am actually approved by my psychiatrist to stay on cannabis and not go on my prescriptions because my symptoms have increased as I've been able to use cannabis with my meditation, my frequencies, and other nervous system regulation practices so that I can remain calm in more situations. Because I know that there was the question about CPTSD and ADHD. And I think the best way to describe it is, have you ever had a reoccurring dream that you couldn't finish? And you just lived it over and over. Not quite Groundhog's Day, because it doesn't really change that much. But it's this moment where you're like driving the car and all of a sudden someone gets too close and you're stuck in the dream where you're getting hit over and over again. That to me is how the CPTSD, the trauma, is wiring with the overloaded information of the ADHD. And yeah, every anxiety became like a distraction to focus on. So rather than going, man, I was violated, I feel so sad, I wish I had somebody who had been there for me, I go, I don't feel good. What show is on now? What can I binge watch? What should I go, does somebody need my help? Does something need to be cleaned? And with ADHD, it becomes distraction, 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 distraction. But that's all dopamine fueling. Like that, I know people who end up with intolerances. You hear like porn addictions or destructive alcoholism or those kind of behaviors. To me, that, based on what I've experienced with a lot of ADHD individuals, up close and personal and in support groups, that is from constantly chasing the dragon, trying to get the dopamine levels high enough so you don't have to face the monster at the door, which is the issue that has to be addressed to be released. So that's one of the things that I think is the biggest disservice to our society, is the fear of a person with PTSD seems unpredictable. Like, it's hard to feel safe around somebody if you don't know what might set them off.
You don't know what to expect at all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for me, like, therapy gave me a permission. Once I understood that my chronic PTSD and my ADHD were not helping me because they weren't working together. They were like two angry cats in the same room. Therapy gave me the permission to heal myself. Like, I'm allowed to say, I deserve that these two cats aren't fighting with each other. I deserve to find ways so that they're purring next to each other. Do we need to go to a trainer? What do we need to do? I deserve the opportunity not to feel shame for what appears to be a failing of my morality, but an actual understanding of a complex being that I am and what's going to work for me to make it possible for me to build authentically with other people in a safe way that they could trust who I am.
Well, I'm glad you were able to, therapy was able to provide you with those tools to actually utilize them to actually be able to use for yourself on a daily basis. Now, let's talk about what should we expect if we book a optimizing outcomes session with your
Fantastic.
coaching services.
Thank you. In my coaching and consulting services, the goal of an optimizing outcomes session is to take an idea, a dream you have, and to clarify it into a 3-step next step process where kindness and compassion bring the clarity needed to authentically meet a person where they are. I create the personalized plan based on the space of compassionate detachment. Like if you just needed to walk in and say, okay, I want you to see me completely as I am, vulnerable, unsure of myself. I just need someone who's going to be my cheerleader. I need someone who's going to understand me. I need someone who's going to say, yeah, I can hold the space. And I invite you to see yourself through empowering eyes. I invite you to see where you have had strength in the past. I invite you to remember all the times you've built yourself up into being able to complete this dream. Now, I'm a systems thinker, so I'll take these concepts into the systems and cross-reference it with what I know today, like what kind of apps are out there, resources, how to Google, how to write an AI prompt, so that I take all of this opportunity that a person who is just maybe getting in their toes wet into what's the online world. Maybe they just want to start a YouTube channel. Maybe they want to have a wedding. Maybe they want to do something, but they're just like, I don't know how to do that anymore. There's so many opportunities. And my clientele are more likely to be my age group. So between 30 and 50, neurodiverse individuals that didn't realize they were necessarily neurodiverse, coming into kind of a precipice shifting time where they're like, I've gotten so much done, but I don't feel like I'm successful enough. And so we come and talk and I go, well, let me show you where you have been successful. Let's talk about really your world. Now, where do you want to go with that? And collaborating with their intuition is why I call myself a metaphysical creative consultant, because this isn't about the logical steps of the society. I can't even predict what our economy is going to do in 2 months. Like it's so changing so quickly that what I want to do is help the individual, the client I'm working with, feel like in their world, in their reality, they can get a solid grasp of this amazingly chaotic experience, and they can grow enough that they feel comfortable with it. So for me, it's about basically the main key is that it feels empowering, collaborative, and I bring those plans down to earth for my client so that they can optimize their dream outcome.
I see that because I see you mentioned there you assist your client. You want them to see their true self in their loving eyes.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, my key is, as I've grown, I didn't understand what it felt like to have, for someone to have my back. Like that's only been with the last 6 months for me to even experience what it's like to have someone say, yeah, I believe you. I've got your back.
Like a cheerleader there.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Like, hey, you said this. You're like, oh man, I just finished this issue and I feel really bad about it, but it's hard, but I got it done. And then instead of them being criticized or being, well, have you thought about this? Did you do this correctly? Instead of them going through the same rigmarole they probably have to deal with in their life all the time, I go, congratulations. Wow. Can you believe you got that accomplished? Do you realize how many people are in this scope that haven't? What were you like a year ago? Because comparison can be the thief of joy, or it can be the inspiration for growth. As long as
Yes.
we modeled upon our own personal capabilities, our own realities, not necessarily what we're being shown, but who we've lived as, the patterns, the actions. It's not our words, it's who we've become. So I offer authentic respect and honoring for what people have survived. For I have survived so much. The days I've chosen to live have transformed into, I wake up going, thank you for another day to explore the reality. And every night I go to sleep, it's, if I don't wake in the morning, I am satisfied with my day. And that has taken years to survive, to get to break free of ideation for myself. So I find sharing the stories to help validate something they're going through. Most people don't realize, and this is a Google figure, I've typed it several times, that at least 70% of Americans have had a PTSD related experience in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And 5% of Americans, at least 13 million Americans out of our 350 plus million, are living with PTSD daily.
And doing nothing about it.
Oh, self-medicating, losing friends, losing connections, beating themselves up more so, and not finding any pathways to hope. My shadow, I call him, it was my recent relationship, and we've known each other 30 years. He is back in a big city and has had to go back to the psych ward. He's been an alcoholic. He's gone through even more hard times and violence and survival than I have. And he was the one who told me I was really traumatized. And that's why I was like, I'm calling the psychiatrist now. Because if this man who's been on the streets, who's survived knife fights, is telling me I'm a traumatized person, I'm going to believe them. I'm going to follow up on it. And for him to thank me for giving him enough peace while we were together, for him to be able to disengage enough to observe that he is an alcoholic, for him to be able to see how he's an alcoholic, for him to be able to claim knowing and recognizing when he is choosing to drink because of his alcoholism. That was one of the biggest gifts I could have had. And if it gave him the hope and drive to keep pushing for changing his lifestyle to one that he is going to grow from and get better from, not to please me, not to be seen as somebody amazing, but because it's worthwhile. Because he had a short time in my life to live with peace that I could provide. That's why I really believe in the opportunity to bring the nervous system and awareness, all of it together so we can have that daily peace.
That was indeed a blessing. For right now, what habits or structure do you currently have in place for your self-care?
Great question. I would like to credit my previous festival community.
Mm-hmm.
I was part of a pirate camping LARP community, and our chant is food, water, meds. And so that's the first one. Have I had food, water, meds? Like if I am not able to be in this moment and I'm finding my symptoms acerbated from just stims, tics, negative thinking, intrusive thoughts, whatever it is, I have to go food, water, meds. And then the second layer is mood, consume, or create. Now those were just recent, like last night. I channeled it at like midnight when I was inspired to write all this up. And for me, it's
amazing.
What is my mood? Am I feeling heavy, serious, like the world's going to end? Like, am I happy? Like, what am I feeling? And is it okay? Am I tense? Like, how do I get back to being okay? Now, consume, it's not food, it's shows. It's reading a book. It's bringing something in, like just consuming shows, entertainment, whatever that will allow me to be in the moment. Creating is the reverse. It's me doing something, writing, painting, sculpting, something that puts me in the moment. Yeah. So how do I come back to the moment for those things? Now, here's where the autism and ADHD side comes in. Imagine two puppies. You've got this autistic side, which thrives on routine.
You have the ADHD side.
Which is all about novelty. Exactly. So I've got the routines and novelty, which means I had to build modular routines. So I can wake up in one morning and have coffee. I can wake up in the morning, have coffee and breakfast. I can wake up, have coffee, breakfast, and eat it at the patio. Now, if I get interrupted, get pulled away from one of those steps, I have other systems that are okay enough. So because I have these constant options, my ADHD is set up in a positive way, because I promise you, any addict absolutely does the same thing for the fix. I decided to see that and take it and make it into a healthy system. So one is simplifying. What do I need to do to make it so I have enough choices that I'm not overwhelmed? For that, for me, is lean into the AI, lean into any mental health groups, lean into the support communities. What am I doing too much of or pushing myself to a too high of standard that I can really simplify? Like the example of only having 3 things to do a day. Now, someone with executive dysfunction and task issues and fear and anxiety and all that, it never feels enough. However, I keep seeing other humans and enough studies and evidence that shows slowing down the nervous system allows us also not to make mistakes, allows us to see opportunities we can take to do things in a better way. When we're coming from anxiety, we feel powerless and tend to overreach or overdo, and that extreme can cause more disruptions, like kind of rocking the boat rather than moving gently in one. So for me, it was absolutely imperative to protect my peace, as one of the online influencers says. It's important to be in the moment here. And so I have basically built up like a video game system in my head of choose what's going to make it easier next. And I am still working on getting to believe I deserve to choose the better feeling option, like Abraham Hicks and Vortex and all that stuff. Choose what feels better. When you've come from being denied even your own personal autonomy, it's missing neural pathways to even understand that concept. So I've rebuilt that neural pathway through identifying emotions, watching healthy models, practicing with individuals, and having so much self-compassion in addition to those tools.
Thank you so much. And any words of encouragement to anyone who is supporting someone with a mental illness?
Absolutely. First, understand it is an inside job, no matter what is said. Second, modeling healthy self-management, self-care, and self-respect is one of the ways to bring someone to a place of believing it's possible for them. Now, with my toxic ex, the reason he was able to basically move off the property and we didn't have drama was because my devotion to my healing journey was so intense that I didn't aggravate him. I didn't antagonize him. I sacrificed things, but I modeled peace. I modeled peace no matter what, and there was less energy for him to engage with. So once we find a way to create a pocket of peace in our day, we can grow that into a plot of peace and then a whole paradise of peace that makes sense to us. It's just like training for the Olympics, though. It does take time. Finding those who understand the journey, who are willing to support you where you are, who are celebrating you as an individual, who is following the idea of awareness, acceptance, actualization, advocacy, and alliance, you're going to feel like you can fly. So building that up is how I believe we're going to raise the opportunities for everybody else, by believing, holding each other's hand and being present and really seeing and hearing another person will bring all those dramatic energies down enough that we can work on these solutions together.
That's powerful right there, Crystal, because modeling peace right there, right? You can't control people's action, but you can control your own action. Thank you so much for providing that information. How can our viewers contact you if they want to book you for your coaching services?
Thank you. Well, they can absolutely go to my website, www.ibbi.pro. So Illuminous Beings, being Illuminous, where kindness and compassion bring clarity. They can come to my website. I have a variety of services provided through Calendly. I also have beacons. I am on Facebook, but for TikTok, definitely come and play. I love interacting with my audience. I love cheering people on and watching people blossom. I'm growing my YouTube channel a little bit more. It's just the opportunity to work towards being a public speaker and just inviting other people to a different way of living through being a living example of life is a banquet and most poor suckers are starving to death.
You're doing an amazing job. And thank you so much again for joining us today on the Unfiltered Mind podcast. Thank you for your time. Any last words for me?
Just thank you for taking the chance on me. I have to admit, your invitation to this has been one of those cornerstones for me to believe in myself. Every time we reach out to each other and say, hey, I'm willing to talk to you, it is absolutely an opportunity to rebuild how humanity sees each other. So thank you so much, Jane, for taking the time and the chance to invite me here.
You're welcome, Krista. It's a pleasure. So hold on for me, okay? Just hang tight. I'll come talk to you.
Thank you for listening to Unfiltered Minds podcast, the If you love what you're learning on our podcast, we ask that you please join the Unfiltered Minds community by subscribing and sharing our podcast on YouTube, or you can listen on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. Our dedicated team of ADHD coaches are committed to making a positive impact on the lives of our listeners. Through our thought-provoking podcast, we offer valuable resources, PBT training for ADHD, and a supportive community that understands the journey of mental health challenges. Also, you can visit our website at theunfilteredminds.com, where you can sign up to be a guest on our podcast, as well as sign up for our 8-week parent behavior training course on ADHD.